In this video, we're going to have a look at this complete inbox Sunray 150, a nearly 25-year-old thin client from Sun Microsystems. If you don't know what a thin client is, let alone a Sunray, you're in for a treat. They are pretty interesting little devices. And you can tell they're good based on the proud and prominent Java logo right on the box. I've got a Sunray 2 here, and as you can see, not much to it. Some input for peripherals, USB keyboard and mouse, an output to a monitor, and that's it. Well, there's no hard drive in these little guys. You use them to remotely access a session that is being persisted and controlled entirely on a remote server over the network. Sun Microsystems was, of course, a computing and software company started in the mid-1980s who invented things we still use today, like NFS, ZFS, Java. They really pushed the computing hardware world forward with a lot of their physical machines, but their critical essence and impact, in my opinion, was networking. Sun's motto was, "The network is the computer," and they were right, way before a lot of other people realized it. I think these Sunrays are a really nice manifestation of Sun the company, given that they're essentially useless without a network. The killer feature of these Sunrays is something Sun called hot desking. So you can configure these little Java smart cards as authentication when the server and these clients are configured correctly. You'd log in like this, pull this bad boy out, your session is stored on the server, of course, and you could go down the hall or across the country or back home where you have a Sunray that's VPN'd into your corporate network and you get back to work. I have a video where I finally got this hot desking working between a couple of the Sunrays I already have. I think we'll try that again with this new one. This guy here is a Sunray 1, and I suspect its design language is going to be a lot like the Sunray 150 down here. Speaking of the server and network setup, a word of warning if you're going to go hunt down and play around with these Sunrays. You really can't do much except turn them on unless you have the Sunray server software running remotely somewhere on a server. In my case, I like to use this Sun Fire V240. We'll have a quick look at this machine, and in fact, I have a full rail kit for it, and we're going to put it to good use. We'll get this thing racked up as the first piece of Sun Microsystems equipment in what I'm calling my retro rack in the other room. I'm excited to see what this Sunray 150 is all about, and I'm even more excited to get this box open and see what sort of stuff it came with, brand new. So let's get into it. Let's get in to this box. There's always something sort of nerve-wracking about looking at this older, new, old stock, complete in-box equipment. Now, it has been opened. The eBay seller says they've opened it. I haven't been in here to verify its contents. And speaking of that, a shout out to Vborg and Derek Compute on the Serialport Discord. Vborg actually found a couple of these on eBay. The seller had 2 of them, and Derek Compute realized the seller would take 80 bucks as an offer. I got this shipped 80 bucks to my door, US shipped. I think that's a pretty good deal. I don't know if it's coming across. Maybe that 2U server did it justice. This box is huge. Now, I don't think this is going to be a speed demon by any means. Yeah, look at that. That's looking pretty new to me. This is one of the reasons I bought this. It comes with a brand new USB, what Sun called their Type 6 keyboard. And we've got some documentation in here. I'm getting ahead of myself. There is an interesting piece of literature on the side of the box. Over here we can see the original shipping information. So it came from Sun Microsystems over in Fremont, California, of course. And it was shipped to Access Graphics in Livermore, California. I'll see if I can find anything about them. But this was box 26 of 50, so they ordered at least 50 of these units. I can't imagine what sort of graphics work you'd be doing on a Sunray, as you'll see later when we start using them. Did a little research on Access Graphics, and they weren't exactly a graphics company. In fact, they were a massive distributor of Sun hardware and software in the 1990s. And I mean massive. In the 1990s, they were doing $1 billion, 60% of which apparently came from distributing Sun hardware and software. And the CEO happened to be none other than John Ramsey, the father of JonBenét Ramsey, the young girl who was tragically and mysteriously killed here in Colorado in 1996. I don't know if it got a lot of international attention, but the JonBenét Ramsey case is one of the biggest and popular, for lack of a better word, cold cases here in the United States. There's been countless documentaries. I'm not saying there's a ton of a connection here to this particular unit. Access Graphics was fully owned by Lockheed Martin in the 90s, and I think in 1997 it was sold to GE. So there's some degrees of separation here, but certainly far fewer than I would have thought the Sunray 150 would have to the JonBenét Ramsey case. It's usually less morbid, but I really like to find out where these machines came from, even if it's something as simple as looking at the previous shipping labels on, you know, something you got from eBay. But if you're picking up this old gear on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or garage sales or wherever, definitely ask the person like, hey, what's the story with this machine? It's always very interesting, to me at least, to figure out where they came from and what they were used for in a previous life. Anyway, that's weird. Back to the computers. And then we've got this customer information sheet, original from Sun. I don't think it's been messed with. It's got stuff like the part number and the Ethernet address of the unit. It's actually the MAC address, I think. That's sort of cool. I am gonna keep all this stuff, of course, so I can just slide that back in there. All right, let's go inside. I mean, we gotta start with the keyboard, right? So it appears to have never been opened. Let's get a closer look. I don't know much about Sun keyboards other than they're a little different than the typical PC keyboard. And I think this USB style Type 6 is pretty late in the line. I think the 90s ones are pretty desirable. This is a USB keyboard, which is more useful, to be honest. Yeah, this is brand new. I cannot believe this. Get this cardboard out of the way. I am, I guess you could say, a collector, obviously. So I will keep all this stuff. Wow. Yeah, so right off the bat, the funny thing about Sun keyboards is you have all these extra keys. Stop, again, props, undo, copy. And yeah, this is definitely later in the line. Does not feel particularly luxurious. Pretty mushy keys, and it's light. It weighs nearly nothing. And that's what I was talking about there. On the back, you can see it says Sun Model Type 6 USB. Certainly looks fantastic, though. I mean, I'm not complaining, but yeah, a little cheap. Let's do a little compare and contrast. This is the only other Sun keyboard I have. I was just recently able to acquire from a very generous viewer named Nathan a SparkStation IPX, and I think I'm the second owner. Definitely you're going to be seeing videos on this thing in the future. I have a very brief sneak peek on my Patreon, but it came with this Sun Type 5C, and I don't know, honestly, it's not much better, but it is heftier. I don't know if it's coming across, but it stands sort of taller. It probably weighs pushing twice as much and just seems to be a sort of heftier unit. And there you can see it's a Sun Model Type 5C. It's of course not USB. USB with the Type 6 I just got and whatever this is. What other treasures are in here? We've got the Sun Solutions CD Special Focus Application Service Providers. A little registration reminder. Proud owner of this Sun Microsystems Ethernet cord. You know what though? Doesn't say Sun on it. It's got the Sun coloring. I'll take it. Oh baby. I had no idea this would be in. Yes. Yes. New mouse pad. Look at that. Like I was telling you, the network is the computer. Oh man, what a pleasant surprise. This is like the palm rest for the keyboard, and that'll actually make it pretty nice looking, I think. Got this power brick hiding over here. There should be a mouse floating around here somewhere. Maybe we'll find it later. Got some documentation. The Sunray 150 Enterprise Appliance User's Guide. Shrink wrapped, and it's pretty thick. I'll probably cut the shrink wrap. So this is counterintuitive. When you're collecting this old stuff, you can see how it's being warped. It's the shrink wrap shrinking over time. And so a lot of people are big on, like, you know, shrink wrapped in box. Well, probably not for their Sunray 150 Enterprise Appliance User Guide. But the point is, you want to actually cut this stuff or to relieve some of that tension. Otherwise, your item or your, especially boxes, like box video games, they get kind of just like crammed down like that. At any rate, probably won't read that. Got the Sun Workstation Ergonomics Guide, how to look like a total dork using your computer. Some exercises, maybe. How to type. A very extensive guide on the mouse and keyboard in a bunch of different languages. I really hope that mouse is in there. So far, so good. Let's get the Sunray itself out. It's quite large. I think it's just a 15-inch monitor. I'll pull this out with the styrofoam, and I'll be back. This thing is so much bigger than I had imagined, and it is new. I don't think it's ever been used. The mouse was floating around in there. Let's get all this plastic off. Here it is. Look at this. It's got this taped on sort of front piece of instructions with everything that came with the kit, you know, basics on how to plug it in. This is just fantastic. I think this thing looks a lot better than I thought it would. It looked like really goofy kind of late 90s jelly bean stuff, but I kind of like it. How many people have one of these in their collection? Probably not a lot. Little Sun branded 3-button, you know, Unix style mouse. We will be running Solaris Unix on this thing, or on the server anyway. It's also very light and cheap, I guess. Cheap feeling. But I love the logo. We've got the critical component of any Sunray here. The smart card slot on the right hand side there. Excellent. Sort of trying to get everything hooked up here. And of note, a lot of these Sun keyboards, the idea was you would actually have another USB, in my case, or other connector to plug the mouse in. And you can see they have like the physical provisions for it. So I should be able to route a cord, you know, down here like this and into here. But there's no actual plug, at least in this Type 6 I've got here. Let me pull the other one. So here's that slightly older one, well, a lot older. And you can see it's actually got a spot that you would put the mouse in and route your mouse cable in. That's super weird. So they were using the same molding for these. You can see the spot. Maybe there are USB versions that do this. I don't know, that's kind of lame. So that's probably why this mouse cable is so long. That's not a problem though. There's like 4 USB slots on the back of this bad boy. Not an issue. Also unsure why they use different colored cables for the keyboard and the mouse. Kind of odd. Sort of nitpicking here. I think it looks good. It's got this nice external Sun AC adapter, Sun branded. Fairly good weight. You can tell it's well made at any rate. And then it came with 2 absolute monster power cables. I don't need 2, but these are like super nice. The material is still really supple, like thick gauge. These are really nice cables. And we're gonna use them. We're going all original on this setup. Well, I don't know about you, but I personally feel like I'm about to get a lot of work done. I mean, you saw the sign. This is an enterprise appliance. Everything's hooked up except for the network. So we'll have to hook up the server, and that's going to be a different part of the video for sure. That's a whole nother story. I guess I should show you around town. So they were touting all this ergonomic aspect of this thing. So it raises up and down, and the mechanism is still working. And then we've got this nice tilt capability. All the connectors are along the bottom here. Let me show you that. Nothing too surprising. We've got 4 USB ports right here. That's actually pretty nice. And then we've got what is very likely a 10100 NIC Ethernet port there. Now here is out to a projector. This is raw RGB out, I believe. Now remember, enterprise appliance. This would have been in like a conference room hooked up to a projector. So you'd come in, the big presentation is ready, you plug her in, and you're projecting out over this. I'll see. No promises. I've got this OSSC, so I might be able to capture raw RGB output from this thing. That'd be kind of cool. And then right over here, we've got a video in, composite video in for a camera that Sun would sell with these Sunrays. Over on the left-hand side, we've got some audio out and in, headphones, microphone, and then the only other buttons on the machine on the right-hand side under the smart card slot, we've got some brightness up and down buttons. It's pretty typical with these Sunrays that they don't have a power switch. They're meant to be plugged in and turned on for the rest of their existence. So what I'm expecting, best case scenario, is this thing's going to boot up. We should hopefully get some really nice Sun splash graphics and all that. And then it's just going to kind of loop around looking for a server because it's not on the network yet. The worst case scenario is that it's been plagued with bad capacitors inside because it is of that era and it doesn't work at all. Let's zoom you in here. This thing probably hasn't been turned on since it was tested after manufacturing. I'm going to flip the switch here. I see some lights on the right. See the screen doing stuff. Ooh, that doesn't look good. This light is green, but the screen is just strobing. Turn this up. Oh, this isn't good. I can hear it. Every time it flickers, I'm hearing like a little, not a click, but a really faint sound. I'm taking a look at the power supply here. It should be 12 volts out and getting 9.8. It's hard to say, you know, maybe this thing's smart enough when it's not under load to do what it needs to do, but that's a little suspicious. It's got one of these super annoying center post plug deals. So the question is, do I have one of those? Amazingly, I do. It's not a perfect fit. The post inside is much smaller, not as thick as the one on the Sun, so that might cause us some grief, but it does fit. So let me find a power supply. Got the old Wifami here, variable power supply, only the best, and got it set to 12.7, and it does the same thing. So I'm pretty sure it's one of those deals where it just knows that there's no load. Yeah, 9.8. I'll try it. I think we've got a problem inside the Sunray. Same exact behavior, unfortunately. So I don't know if you can tell, but it's just ever so faintly blinking really rapidly. You can kind of tell right here. And then the green light is on. So I think it's just a monitor issue. Old computers require modern solutions. This is an OSSC, an open source scan converter. I was showing it earlier, sort of a accidental foreshadowing. And basically it can take all sorts of RGB and other inputs and convert it to HDMI that a normal monitor can use. And so on the back, remember, there was this thing that looks like a VGA plug, but it's raw RGB. It's not normal VGA. You can't just plug it into a CRT or whatever. This thing can take raw RGB signals and output it over HDMI. So check this out. Pointing you at this modern HDMI monitor. This is the default sort of splash screen that the OSSC makes. I'm going to turn on the Sunray. It's loading up and blinking to the right here. This demo's not going very well. I need to change the input. All right, we're going to roll through here. So I think I want AV3. Yeah. That is output from the Sunray. This is the design language of this really old Sunray firmware, which I've never seen before, actually. I'll show you some more modern Sunrays eventually in this video, and it doesn't look like this. I was cautiously optimistic that this light goes from orange to green, meaning hopefully the computer aspect is working and we just have like a physical issue with the monitor. What this icon means is, what we're hoping here is that it's looking for a server and can't find one. It's like sort of waiting to get on the network and find a server to start displaying something with. So I'm going to crack into the manual here and see if it says anything about that icon. It means the unit is starting up. The action to take is wait. If the unit does not start within a short time, contact your system administrator. Well, that's not good. I would much rather be seeing an icon along these lines, a server that can't connect to the Sunray, which just indicates, it went out to the network and couldn't find a server. That's what I'd rather see. So we might be in trouble still. One thing I was worried about is that it only uses the monitor output once it's like fully initialized and talked to a server and you're logged in over here or something. It's unclear to me whether it just purely mirrors it. I would hope so, but at any rate, this kind of implies there's something wrong with this beyond the monitor, but we'll see. I think we've done what we can do here so far, short of me becoming an electrical engineer, which isn't going to happen this week. And we will get the server configured and get this thing connected to it and see if that changes the behavior. What the hell? I literally went like this, and then I restarted it, and now the monitor's fine. What? I know all you Sun enthusiasts were dying to know this at home. It does indeed mirror it to the RGB. We've cracked that code. I wonder if this was like some capacitors had to warm up. That's not the right word. Reform, probably also not the right word. Again, I'm not an electrical engineer. I can't decide if I'm happy about this. I think I'm happy about this. This is good. Don't know what changed, but we're sort of in business. I kind of whapped it just the one time. I was also sort of messing around with these, and they don't appear to do anything. It's like, I don't know. I think the best thing we can do is fire up that server. Same game plan as before. See if getting this thing on the network changes its behavior. And we'll go from there. This is my Sun Fire V240. I think this is maybe the second piece of Sun equipment I ever bought. It's by far the piece of equipment I've spent the most hours with, and I really like it. I'm a big fan of the 2U form factor. That's the height of this thing. You can get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of, places to put stuff, how loud they are, and this is true to this day, by the way. I'm definitely a fan of 2U servers. But of course, these Sun Fires are just beautiful. You've got the Sun Microsystems logo. That's what draws me to them, to be honest, as ridiculous as it is to admit that. So let's pop this thing open before we rack it up. Get you in here. Right away, you can see plenty of space. The dry bays are in the front, of course, and we can take off this shroud. In here we've got 2 processors. We'll talk about those in a second. And I'm almost maxed out on RAM. I've just got 7 2 gig DDR1 sticks. A really generous and longtime viewer named Rick sent a ton of this DDR RAM to me. We were trying to max this thing out, and one of the sticks got zapped during shipping or something, and it didn't work. I just got to get on eBay and do it. I'm ashamed to admit how often I think about maxing this thing out, and I just haven't gotten around to it. So Rick, if you still watch the channel, thank you very much. Now, I had quite an adventure trying to get this thing to work. It shipped with only one of these fancy bespoke heat sinks, but it had both CPUs. So of course I had bought another heat sink fan assembly for half what I paid for the machine in the first place, popped it in, nothing. And finally, I think it was a viewer named Nathan that said, hey, maybe the CPU's fried. And indeed it was. This thing is sporting 2 of these Ultra Spark 3Is, and as you can tell, it's really hard to see the writing on this thing because I think it got absolutely toasted. Been thinking about turning this into like a Christmas ornament, sneaking on the tree, see if my wife notices. That's one of the interesting aspects about this Sun gear that you need to keep in mind if you're going to collect it or dabble in it a little bit. These are not x86 CPUs. They're using the Spark architecture. Sun used that until the early to mid 2000s. They started switching to x86 because Intel was pumping out, and AMD were pumping out chips that for the price point could run circles around these. Remember, for cost. So the Spark stuff was impressive, but the Intel stuff, the AMD and x86 stuff, just got so cheap. And eventually Sun had to kind of bite the bullet and started making x86 machines. Something interesting to keep in mind. That's enough yapping about this thing. I really do love this machine. I have excellent news. A few months ago, I picked up a new old stock, complete inbox rail kit for it. If you collect this older hardware, you'll almost never get the rails. They come mangled, you get half of them. I think I have a half rail kit that came with this. I decided to splurge on this one. We're gonna rack her up, give her the respect she deserves in the retro rack. See what's in here. Bet you didn't think you were getting 2 unboxings in this video. I bought this 8 months ago. I lay awake at night thinking about, I need another stick of RAM for this machine, and I need to rack it up with this complete rail kit. It's dated March 23rd of 2004. The reveal. Oh yeah, that's looking good. System may fall off rails if installed incorrectly. Not worried about that. Like I was saying earlier, I actually have like a half or a partial, maybe a third rail kit. And the hard part to come by are some very finely, nicely machined screws to actually put the rails on the side of the unit. And I had these screws, but not the full rail kit, and I wasn't sure when I was going to rack it up. So I sent those to a viewer named Brian who had everything but the screws. And then eventually he actually showed me the eBay listing where you can get this complete in box deal. So Brian, that was months ago, but thank you if you're watching, because I wouldn't have found the eBay listing without you. And yeah, this is very exciting. I'm going to get these installed on the machine. I'll show you that, and then we'll rack her up. Getting these put on here, starting with the right side. They're usually specific to a side, and they'll be labeled. This one says front R, meaning it goes on this right side. As you saw, they come completely assembled like this, but you can't really, screw them on when they're fully put together. So let me show you how these work. I'm going to slide this back on, just like that. So this will be bolted in, of course, and this green little lever allows the machine, you'll have to imagine I'm the rack, to slide out like that. And then there's another little mechanism here. You push that and it lets you take the rail entirely off. And that's so you can take the machine out of the rack for service and then slide it back on the rails when you're done. That's more than you wanted to hear about that. The point is you got to take them apart like that to screw on the piece that actually attaches to the machine. And also that allows you to rack this up without the machine in it, obviously. That would be really hard with the machine on there. It's got this spacer tool that it says is like very, very important. So I guess I'll look up what that's for. And then they're so proud of those screws I was talking about. The bag they come in is on the bill of materials, number 5, screw sack. Rails are in on either side. I chose a spot in the middle because I'm going to rack up more Sun gear. If you aren't familiar, this is what I'm calling my retro rack, where I'm going to put this sort of older gear, networking equipment. I'm going to have a spot for Sun, Compaq, and IBM at the very least. Sun's going to be in this general area. There wasn't anything in the instructions about that spacer tool, so if she dies, she dies. Let's get the machine in there. This is not always the easiest thing to do. with any rail kit, really. I think I'm getting lucky here, though. So we should hear some clicking. And I think it's in. So now the machine is secure. It's in there. You can still get to the faceplate, of course. And these green buttons, you can press those. Roll the machine out on these nice rails. Perform service, lift the lid way out here where you can get access. Or take it entirely off the rail system. Oh yeah, how exciting. That looks great. Excited to add more stuff. All that gear at the top produces a 10.0 network. Eventually this whole lab will be on there. This Sun machine is on my home network, or it used to be 192.168.1. We're gonna leave it on that for this video, so we're not doing too much networking. This is already an overloaded video as it is. I'm gonna fire this thing up and let's get Sunray in. The machine is up and healthy. You can see I'm logged in here. It's running Solaris 10. Solaris was Sun Microsystems Unix variant. It used to be called Sun OS. This one's running Solaris 10 from '09. This machine is 4 or 5 years newer than that, so it's a little... Solaris 8 or 9 might be better for this machine, but I kind of have this one set up in such a way that the sun rays work, and I've put a lot of hours into it, and I kind of don't like to mess with it. I really need to make a backup is what I need to do. Let's get a known good Sunray working first to make sure the server's working. This is running the Sunray server software. We'll poke at that a little bit in a moment. Let's hook up one of those Sunray 2s. Let's hook up this later Sunray 2. I know this one works and should get along with the server just fine. So we'll get it on the network. We'll get it hooked up to this monitor I've got here. And just like the big one we were looking at, these things don't have power switches. So you just plug them in and it's meant to be on forever. I'll point you at the monitor. I am literally just plugging it in right now, and let's see what we get. This one has the mark of the beast. The other one probably will too. They like to auto-update their firmware. I don't even know if we can even get this other one working. It'll be interesting to see if it works with the version of the server I have. So here's the design language difference I was talking about in this later version. Looks quite a bit different than what we were looking at earlier. So what it's doing right now is basically trying to go off and find a server. And it did, and I logged in earlier, so I have a session already. This is actually a pretty good example. Let me get a keyboard on this thing. Earlier I had made sure this was working, and I literally just ripped the power cord out, and my session was preserved on the server, so I can log in here, and the screen size is wrong, but here we go. This is Solaris 10, and I am one user logged in, and I'm able to access all this remotely over the network. Remember, this is running on the server, and I can load up Star Office, and just get all sorts of reports and enterprise stuff done. Back over on the server, Sun provided tons of command line utilities for interacting with these Sunray remote terminals. I think it's UT session, and I think it's P for print. Yeah. So it knows that one, Sunray is connected, some token information, and Clab, that was the Unix user that I'm logged in as. So this is working okay. Let's see if there's any difference on that 150 if a network is present. The moment we've all been waiting for, unwrapping the Cat 5 cable that came with this thing. Is it even a Cat 5 cable? It is, Cat 5. Let's get this thing on the network. Not holding my breath on this, I think it's exceedingly likely this might have been broken from the factory, and that's why it's new old stock sitting in a box. They probably tried it out and threw it back in. But they do like being online, so you never know. I'm going to flip the power right now. Oh, it's doing the screen strobe thing again. That's funny. Something's got to warm up. I'm going to turn the OSSC on in the meantime. Well, I stand corrected. Obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about. The splash screen I was showing you on the Sunray was when you're already out of session. This is when you're establishing a fresh one. Let's see if the keyboard works. Ooh, it's really delayed. Like, look how bad my typing went. Whoa, it is slow. Oh, look how slow it is. I bet the server, this thing is just not going to do well with this newer version of Solaris. I mean, it's like 10 years newer than this thing. Oh, man. Yikes. Come on, baby. Probably typed my password wrong. This is going to be bad. Oh, this poor thing. Ooh, mouse is fast. I wonder what's up with the keyboard input. This might take a while. About 2 minutes later, it's trying. It's going to take a minute. It knows, back on the server, it can see it. So this guy here is the new one, and it knows that the Clab user is trying to log in. I'll be back when it loads up, if it loads up. Don't worry, guys. We've got Java and Flash. This is sort of a secondary splash screen the Sunrays show right after you log in. Usually it shows up within a second and it's gone in a second. And we're a couple minutes in here. We're about 15 minutes in. She's trying, guys. Folks, she's really trying. Love that background, by the way. Well, it's been about 20 minutes and I can kind of like move around the screen. This is what the Sunrays do when the screen is too big. I should be able to right click here though. I don't think it ever fully loaded. I'm impressed it got this far, to be honest. Like, the firmware is so out of date. So I'm going to shut it off. I may or may not hit it again. Just, I don't know. And we'll restart it and see if we can get the normal screen working. Go from there. I'm telling you, the WAP restart combo works every time. Interesting. It kept the session. It's doing better. It thinks it's logged in. I can get this thing off now. It's the same story, just like dreadfully slow. And I don't think the session has loaded fully. Cool to see this monitor work. I don't know why it works after a restart. If you know, let me know. I'm guessing some sort of recap is required. I'm pretty happy to have gotten this far, to be honest. I think this is as far as I want to go with the Sunray 150 right now, and I'll explain that after I show you what's going on with this one. This is a newer unit, a Sunray 270, sort of one of the successors to this guy, and at least, you know, to give this video some substance, I'll show you what it's supposed to be like to use one of these built-in monitor deals. I do get to use the Sun keyboard and mouse with it, so that's exciting. And you know the drill by now, no power button, so let me get this thing plugged in so you can see the full boot process. So it also has the more modern firmware, and if it needed to power cycle itself for some reason, trying to look for a server, you'd see the Oracle logo just like you saw before. All of my Sunrays that I have been updated to newer firmware, and I think it would be really interesting to go ahead and try to find a server that supports this older one. So yeah, we can log in here. Yeah, working perfectly. This is a much faster unit. And we're in. I wonder if my Quake 2 shortcut still works. Oh yeah. You're not exactly gaming on these things, but you could. I mean, you can, obviously. Not very well. I was checking on the server. I'm running the Sunray server software version 5.4, which is pretty late in the Sunray life cycle. And in fact, that was just what was on Oracle's website, I don't know, 1 or 2 years ago when I went looking for it. So I have a couple leads on some older versions. I've got other Sun equipment I want to rack up, get Solaris 8 installed, or 9, probably 8, and then see if we can get this on another Sunray server with like sort of more period correct firmware versions, and I think it's just going to behave better. It's an absolute relief that it does seem to be working even when I need to use it with the monitor. I suspect that's like a recap issue. That'll be throw that on the future projects list. But overall, I really can't say I'm disappointed. This thing is in excellent shape aside from the monitor issue. It's clearly brand new. I got all this cool sort of extra stuff with it. I've got a beautiful Sun keyboard, even if it's a little on the cheap side, but that's okay. It looks great, it's working. So like I was saying, what's next for this Sunray 150 is it needs a little bit of repair, obviously. The monitor is very inconsistent. Probably a recap issue. Let me know if you have any other opinions on that. And then I'd like to get it on a Sunray server that leaves it somewhat period correct. I don't even know what version of the Sunray software that would be. So if you know what version of the Sunray server software would be appropriate for like the very early 2000s, and especially if you can get your hands on it and get it to me, let me know. I have a couple leads, but we'll see. So I already mentioned that you do need the server software. It's my understanding there's a Linux version. I'm running a Solaris version on a real, Sun Fire, real Sun gear. I suspect you could virtualize the server in Linux and get it installed, but I've never tried it myself, so that's going to be something to look out for if you want to mess around with these Sunrays. And also the Java smart cards, they're not required for operation. I haven't used them this whole video, but they're very finicky, even just to get them to work and to get the authentication to work. So like this isn't even going to work. I need to mess with it some more. It's going to ask me for a password, which is probably what you'd normally want. But the only cards I've ever gotten to work are these Sun branded ones, which were from Sun Microsystems. A former employee actually sent me these a long time ago, so thank you if you're still watching. But we've got some top minds on it in the Serial Port Discord. I think I'm going to order a batch from a UK website that seems to have what we need. We're going to figure out how to program them. They adhere to a particular ISO standard, but if you buy some on eBay or Amazon or whatever, I think they're blank, and the sun rays just won't even recognize them. So I think you need a reader. We'll need to clone some of my good ones, but that project is in the works, I think, slowly. But just another word of warning, if you think you're just going to buy some of these cards and slap them in some sun rays, it's a little more involved than that. I hope you enjoyed watching this and that it was exciting enough to see it work. We didn't play with them too much. These will definitely be back in future videos. I've even got some other ones I think maybe I haven't shown before. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to open like a time capsule like that. That was super fun, and this thing is in just great condition aside from its slight physical issue. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. I've got a lot more of these videos on the way, tons of ideas, and you can kind of get sneak peeks of what I'm thinking about over on my Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this brief tour of the sun rays, and in particular, this pretty nice looking Sun Ray 150. See you in the next one.